The Erotic Gaze, How Cultural Narratives Shape Our Desire and Attraction, is a reflective theory-driven documentary that examines how desire is not simply an instinctive or purely personal experience, but one that is carefully structured by cultural stories, visual traditions, power relations, and shared fantasies that circulate through media, art, and everyday social life. The film opens by challenging the popular belief that attraction is natural or self-evident, instead proposing that what individuals find erotic is learned over time through repeated exposure to images, narratives, and social cues that teach viewers how to look, whom to look at, and what meanings to attach to bodies. Drawing from film theory, psychoanalysis, feminist critique, sociology, and cultural studies, the documentary traces the concept of the erotic gaze as a historically constructed way of seeing, rooted in cinema, advertising, literature, and now digital media. Early sections focus heavily on classical Hollywood cinema, where the camera is shown to operate as a surrogate for the viewer's desire, lingering on certain bodies while rendering others invisible, passive, or expendable. Scholars interviewed in the film explain how framing, lighting, narrative roles, and editing patterns taught generations of audiences to associate desirability with specific traits: youth, whiteness, thinness, heterosexual femininity, and masculine dominance, while naturalizing unequal power dynamics as romantic or inevitable. The documentary then expands outward to explore how these cinematic codes seep into everyday life, shaping how people perform gender, flirtation, and sexuality, often unconsciously reproducing gestures and expectations they have absorbed from screen culture. A central argument of the film is that the erotic gaze does not merely objectify others. It also disciplines the self, teaching individuals to view their own bodies from an external perspective and to evaluate their worth through imagined spectatorship. Through interviews with performers, models, and ordinary social media users, the film illustrates how people learn to anticipate how they will be seen and desired, adjusting posture, clothing, facial expression, and even personality to align with dominant erotic scripts. Midway through the documentary, the focus shifts toward race, class, and colonial histories, revealing how desire has been shaped by exoticism and hierarchy. The film examines how non-white bodies have often been eroticized as other, simultaneously fetishized and marginalized, and how these narratives continue to influence attraction today through stereotypes that masquerade as personal preferences. Scholars argue that the erotic gaze frequently disguises power as desire, making social inequalities feel intimate and voluntary rather than imposed. The documentary is careful to balance critique with lived experience, featuring voices who describe the pleasure and affirmation that can come from being desired, even when that desire is shaped by problematic narratives. This tension between desire as a source of joy and desire as a vehicle for control runs throughout the film and gives it emotional as well as intellectual depth. As the film progresses, it turns to feminist and queer interventions that seek to disrupt or reimagine the erotic gaze. Experimental films, erotic art, and alternative pornographies are presented as attempts to redistribute looking, allowing subjects to desire without being reduced to objects and to be seen without being consumed. The documentary highlights how queer cultures, in particular, have played with visibility and secrecy, spectacle and refusal, creating erotic languages that resist mainstream norms while still grappling with the desire for recognition. Interviews with queer artists and theorists emphasize that escaping dominant narratives entirely may be impossible, but that desire can be renegotiated, made more self-aware, and less rigid. In its later sections, the erotic gaze turns its attention to the digital age, arguing that platforms like Instagram, TikTok, dating apps, and streaming services have intensified and accelerated the circulation of erotic narratives. Algorithms are framed as invisible directors of desire, amplifying certain looks, bodies, and behaviors while quietly suppressing others, thereby shaping attraction at a scale and speed unprecedented in earlier media forms. The film shows how scrolling culture fragments attention, encouraging rapid judgments based on surface aesthetics, while metrics such as likes, views, and matches transform desire into quantifiable validation. At the same time, the documentary acknowledges that digital spaces have opened new possibilities for self-representation, allowing individuals to craft their own erotic images and narratives outside traditional gatekeepers. This duality, liberation entangled with commodification, is presented as one of the defining contradictions of contemporary desire. Visually, the film reinforces its themes through layered imagery, juxtaposing classic film scenes with social media feeds, advertisements with intimate home videos, and slow contemplative shots of bodies with rapid-fire montages of online content. The voiceover frequently returns to the idea that the gaze is never neutral. To look is always to interpret, to judge, and to desire within a framework shaped by history and culture. In its final movement, the documentary becomes more introspective, asking viewers to reflect on their own desires and to consider which parts feel genuinely personal and which might be inherited from stories they did not choose. Rather than offering a moralistic conclusion or prescribing what desire should look like, the erotic gaze ends by inviting a more conscious engagement with attraction itself, suggesting that ethical desire begins with awareness, recognizing the narratives that have taught us how to look, questioning whom those narratives serve, and allowing room for curiosity, uncertainty, and change. The film closes on the idea that desire, while shaped by culture, is not fixed, and that by examining the gaze rather than denying it, individuals may find new ways of seeing others and themselves beyond the limits of inherited scripts.